Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. We are tonight's entertainment.
Sound good?
Yes, sir! I know who I am!
Did IQs just drop shot while I was away?
I have a plan. I like this shit.
You know, it's exciting.
Dance off, bro.
It is your
Me and you.
destiny.
Welcome to the Atlantic Screen Connection podcast.
Let the games begin.
Hello and welcome to Atlantic Screen Connection, episode 8. I'm Jason.
I'm Lee.
And for episode 8, Lee, this week we're going to be talking about... What are we talking about, sir?
Well, we're talking about Seven Samurai.
Seven Samurai.
The seminal classic.
1954 Akira Kurosawa film that won our poll on Twitter under the hashtag AtlanticSC with 81 votes.
Incredible.
At 53%. 53% of the people voted for Seven Samurai.
And you know what's the best part about that, Jason?
What is it?
It was my option. It was the one I put forward to the people. Out of the 4 choices, I chose Seven Samurai for the people. And the people agreed with me because, well, we have a rapport. They just like me most. I'm sorry, it's the case. I mean, I feel bad for you and all, but...
Oh, don't. Why do you think I partnered up with you? It's because you have a likability.
Yeah, I've got that mass appeal.
There you go. Yeah, so that's exactly how we framed it. We had put out 4 choices on the poll. Mine was Scarface from 1932. My girlfriend Leslie had suggested Frances Ha, which got a significant percentage as well. I think she got 16% of the vote.
Yeah.
I got 17. You got 53. And then Maria suggested Grease, which is Lee's wife-to-be.
Yeah, that's right.
Oh, yeah.
I was expecting Grease to win, realistically, because I was just like, everybody knows Grease. And realistically, they might want to hear us assholes talk about it for a while, I suppose.
Meaning, did she really like the movie, or did she just put it out there to fuck with us?
She does kind of like the movie. I actually really like the movie, so I was kind of hoping it would win, but
oh, okay.
I'm happy enough that people picked my choice anyway, so it makes no odds to me.
Anyway, in any case, how are you doing?
You
You haven't had a chance to speak this week.
Yeah, I know. We've been busy, I suppose.
Oh, I've been
You've been all
correcting
over the
exams
place,
like a motherfucker.
I know, we had to delay our recording because you've got real work to bring home. That's a nightmare.
Exactly. Have food to provide and kids to not let die, which is great.
You selfish prick. Yeah, no, I'm fine. I'm recording this a little hungover, if that helps. But
oh, really?
yeah, no, I had a few drinks with my my parents and Maria last night. So if this doesn't sound like my A game, it's because it's not.
I'm pretty sure they'll find it convenient with every other week.
You prick. You meant consistent. How's you, man?
I'm doing quite well, actually. I've got a lot of correcting done, but I still have 100 and some odd, I think 150 other essays to correct right now, and that's what work is like for me. I have grammar tests to correct, but I'll be getting most of that done this week because they have other exams, so I have another 150 coming in.
Sweet
So I have
Jesus.
to correct all that. And other than that, I managed to celebrate Force Friday.
Force Friday's not a thing.
Shut up,
they
you
already have May the 4th. I mean, they can't just have more Star Wars days.
Every day is Star Wars
No,
Day.
this is
Every
unreasonable.
day is
We have
Star Wars
other
Day.
things to watch. Other franchises to celebrate.
Stupid fucking baking shows.
Yeah. You know what? I've added to my repertoire of crappy daytime or like late evening TV. I now watch a dancing show as well. Whoa! You're just jealous, man. You're jealous that I have such great taste in TV.
Moving on. No, and that's it. I guess that's about it for me. My daughter told me this week that she wants to make movies, so that's great. I actually sent out a picture this week on Twitter of my daughter watching Terminator 2 for the first time, which was kind of fun.
That was adorable. I loved it.
Exactly. Like just wide-eyed, her hand just reaching up to her mouth to cover it. And I
So
missed the
good.
opportunity of taking a better shot of her because at one point she literally put both hands up when she saw like the T-1000 stab the guy through the eye. She was like, oh my God, what is that?
Oh my God, that's amazing. Anyway. You would love to have those moments captured.
Yeah, man, it's going to be great. All right, so enough banter. We're hoping this pleases you guys out there because I hate talking to Lee.
Another week with this prick.
Anyway, so I was forced to watch a trailer because I hadn't watched any trailers this week. So I'm going to let you start this ball a rolling there, sir. What trailer did you force me to watch this week?
I forced you to watch the only trailer I seen this week, which was Dog Eat Dog, the latest Paul Schrader directed action movie. It's starring Nicolas Cage and Willem Dafoe. And what did you think about it, Jason?
It looked like a poor man's Nice Guys, a really shitty version of Boondock Saints crossover with, I don't know, bit parts of what Schrader's done before in the past, and just really second-tier Brian De Palma crap. I have no interest in this fucking movie at all.
Yeah.
So thank you, Lee.
You're welcome.
But it looks, there's certain parts that look funny, but it looks like forced humor. It seems like it's predictable. It doesn't seem like it's going to be going anywhere that it needs to go, because I feel like I've seen this movie before. It's pressing all the buttons that I typically would want to see, but it seems to be doing it in a way that I'm like, oh, come on.
No, yeah, you know, that's the thing. The only note I really wrote about it is that it looks, like you said, like a bad Shane Black script. Yeah, but then I like watching terrible Nicolas Cage films. I love watching Willem Dafoe being fucking weird Willem Dafoe. But there was one glimpse in the trailer of getting to see Willem Dafoe look himself in the mirror and go crazy Willem Dafoe, like he always does in all his movies. So I was kind of hoping that this might turn out to be at least another opportunity to see him go a little nuts again. But like, I don't know, Nicolas Cage sounded bored as fuck. The plot seemed hackneyed and the violence was violent-y, and yeah, what do you want?
He mentions, like, you know, the forced joke at the end of the trailer is like, we have to be like the samurai, which is kind of fun because it plays into what we're going to be talking about today.
Oh, yeah.
And then, you know, Willem Dafoe just says Jackie Chan, and you're like, what the fuck?
Yeah. Random humor, lol.
Exactly. I was like, he's the dumb guy.
Yeah, I get you.
Whatever.
But yeah. So yeah, that's Dog Eat Dog. You can watch the trailer. I'm not going to say watch the film. I'll probably see it at some point because I have to see films. It's what I do. But yeah, whatever.
I'll do it based on your recommendation. If you tell me to go watch it, I'll watch it. But other than that, you know, it's not something I'll rush to see.
Yeah.
I'll include the trailer in this because, I mean, although I'd say I'm a Paul Schrader fan, I'm more a fan of his early writing, you know, Raging Bull and Taxi Driver and things like that, which are fantastic movies in and of themselves. But I mean, he's never really been a director that I like. Even there was a movie that came out in the 90s. I don't remember exactly what year, but it was called Affliction. It was nominated for Academy Awards and Nick Nolte was in it and all that. And I remember watching that movie and finding it incredibly boring, to the point where even my mom was like, why the hell is this movie getting so much recognition? It's boring as shit. I'd say like the characters are well developed, but it doesn't make for a really interesting story.
Fair enough.
So, but that's it. And I'll include the trailer because I don't mind helping him out to get his stuff out there, getting people aware of it, you know, make up their own minds on it. There is an audience for this movie. I know it. I know there's an audience for this movie, but that's it. Fingers crossed, hoping for the best. My expectations are, like I said, at the bottom of the barrel, where the Paul Schrader stuff usually is. And if it turns out to be good, then I'll have been proven wrong, and that's fine.
Great.
That's fine.
Perfect.
So here you go, guys. I'm going to include the trailer for Dog Eat Dog. Enjoy, and we'll be back after this short break.
Jackie Chan.
There was me, there was Diesel, and there was Mad Dog. We all did our piece at different times, and I was the last to come out. Once you were in, staying out is all but impossible. That's it.
Hey, bro, look at this. This ain't no cop car.
These chaps decided to throw me a welcome home party.
You gotta fight him off
Versace.
We gotta get us some real work because this is no kind of life.
So what's the gig?
This guy's got a 1-year-old out in the Heights. I need you to snatch him.
I don't know, man.
Kid's still a baby. He ain't never gonna know. If he was 4 or something, I'd never be doing that.
You wouldn't do that.
This is the game plan. Big job for us, baby napping.
No, that don't sound so good.
It's not, and I'm not saying it is.
There's a gig and there's a lot of money at the end. Run away to Hawaii. It never works out.
I think it does sometimes. You just don't know about it because they run off to Hawaii and you don't ever hear from them again.
You have absolutely no idea how to control your emotions.
Just take our money. We won't say anything.
We're gonna call the police the minute he gets away.
No, we are not.
I didn't want justice. Am I under arrest? I just wanted what I wanted, just like everyone.
Oh, you guys are so...
Oh, you scared me.
Why? Am I scary?
You feel like you got problems?
Then I started thinking, once you've had money, you're never 100% sure who your friends are. We are not gonna go down. It's gotta be samurai style.
Jackie Chan.
And welcome back. I hope you enjoyed the trailer for Dog Eat Dog.
I sure
and
did.
so that brings us to our second segment, which is what did you watch this week? What did you watch this week, sir?
Yep, this week I seen Anomalisa, the Charlie Kaufman, Duke Johnson directed stop-motion animated film. It came out this year in the UK. It was out last year in the Americas and so on, because obviously it got nominated for the Academy Award for Best Animated Feature, which it didn't win. I can't remember who won. Must have been a Pixar. Basically, it's about this character. Kind of this, it's quite short, but it's kind of like this focused character story about this, what I would say is a pretty unlikable character, who's going through something that, I guess, probably a good number of people go through at some point in their lives. You know, doubt of where you are, and, you know, you get kind of bored of what you're looking at, no matter, you get too comfortable with what you've achieved. Like all Charlie Kaufman films, it's a little, you know, it turns its premise on its head a couple of times, and it's well written narratively and so on, and it's got a few good funny moments, I guess, but generally I found the film a little too cynical and a little too screenplay. Kaufman's great at screenplays. It's what he does, you know, and I've loved his previous work, like Being John Malkovich and Adaptation, and I love what he does when it comes to how he sees filmmaking. I love the way he tackles that. I found Anomalisa, despite it's got this great stop motion feel, the style of the puppets that are involved are great, very human, well utilized. But I found, other than that, there wasn't much in the way of that kind of fuckery with the format. You know, it was just a stop-motion animated film, which is fine, and I don't hold him to that expectation that he has to do something crazy every time he makes a film. But at the same time, given the focused narrative itself, I feel like we didn't spend enough time with the character in the short run we had. I feel like we never got any real reason to sympathize with him, which is fine. We maybe didn't have to, but personally, that's not how I like to see a film. I like to see at least a glimmer of a human beneath the surface, and I saw that in general, but I didn't see it through this character. That's it, though. Good performances, and I'd say if you're a fan of Kaufman stuff, I mean, it's not his best work, but it's definitely worth checking out. But yeah, I don't know. That was Anomalisa. Go see it if you want to see it.
I'll eventually get around to it. I like Charlie Kaufman's work. I mean, Eternal Sunshine of the Spotless Mind is a screenplay by him. I'm one of the few that actually enjoyed the screenplay for Confessions of a Dangerous Mind. I like that movie quite a bit. A lot of people didn't particularly take a liking to it, but I mean, Sam Rockwell's performance in there is just genius. I thought it was great. Also, I mean, Synecdoche, New York is a wonderful film as well. I mean, you could see, like you said, I mean, he's pure deconstruction when it comes to making films, writing scripts and things like that. So he plays with you know, the narrative structure so well that it's kind of interesting. But I mean, that's exactly what I had heard about Anomalisa, where now you feel like it's forced just a little bit too far.
Sure.
Where he's kind of playing with it, and you feel like he's playing with it just for playing with its sake.
Yeah. I mean, the playing that he does with it in this case isn't very interesting, and I don't feel it services the plot very well. But more than that, I just feel like it just felt like a screenplay. You know, like when you could tell you're basically reading a screenplay, but it's there on screen, and that your film doesn't have any real sense of immersion at all. Unless that's the point of the film, which I don't think it was. In this case specifically, I mean, I'm sure there are other cases where immersion's the last thing you want to do, and that's the point. This case, I feel like a little bit of immersion would have pushed the character study a little further, and we never got that because I felt like we were just so clearly watching a screenplay unravel, you know? It's an obtuse kind of way of looking at films, but that's how I choose to see where this fails, because if you're going to be highbrow, you got to be highbrow in an interesting way, and I didn't think this one ticked the box for me. Lots of people I'm sure will love it, but me personally, I thought it was a bit of a disappointment just on its own sake, not compared to other Kaufman work, just on its own narrative's premise. Yeah. I don't think it went far enough, and I don't think it was interesting enough.
And that's fair. That's a fair point. A lot of people, when they're sitting down to watch like one of their favorite directors' movies or even one of the favorite screenwriters' movies, fail to see that maybe this would be one of their lesser efforts, even if there's a lot of effort involved. I mean, I remember sitting in the movie theater watching Wes Anderson's Darjeeling Limited and being like, this is far from being his best work. But I remember going to, I used to work at HMV in Montreal on the corner of Peel and St. Catharines, and one of my coworkers, the person that I used to work with, she came in and said, did you like the movie? And I was like, it was all right. She says, are you insane? It's probably the best movie he's ever made. And I was like, I'm sorry, but no, it's not. And so, and I think that sometimes, like Charlie Kaufman, if ever I was to kind of suggest a movie of his to someone that isn't necessarily into cinema, they might actually be, put off by how gimmicky his movies are.
Yeah, I get that, definitely. Yeah. I find I would be very hard pressed to recommend Kaufman to people.
All right.
So yeah, what did you see?
Okay, you only watched one. Okay, my turn. I got the chance to watch 2.5 movies this week, and I'll start with the half. Cool. Because everyone had been talking about Snowden, I had talked to Leslie, my girlfriend, about the movie, and one of her coworkers had mentioned, have you seen Snowden yet? And luckily enough, being here in Quebec, Snowden only plays at 10 p.m. at night in English, and it's just fucking annoying, so we're possibly going to have to wait for it to come out on video again. Sure. So she wanted to know a little bit more about who Snowden was, what he was what he was implicated in, and how he fit into history right now. And so I had already seen Citizen 4, but she hadn't. And so what I decided to do is start Citizen 4 with her. We started a little bit late on Wednesday night, so we haven't finished that yet, and that's it. Yeah. So I'm giving Citizen 4 another whirl. I love it. Anybody who hasn't seen that documentary is a must-see viewing, in my opinion, for everyone.
I'm one of those somebodies.
Okay. Do yourself a favor. It's a lot of very good information. So I'm going to leave it at that. The one that really got to me this week that I really, really loved was Hello, I Am David. It's a movie that's on Netflix right now. And it revolves around David Helfgott. Anybody who thinks they've heard that name before, then you've seen the movie Shine, which is basically a movie where Jeffrey Rush plays a pianist. I think the movie came out, it's either 94 or 96. It might be 95 anyway, one of those 3 years. And it's always been one of my mom's favorite films. And she showed that to me when I was a teen. She says, watch this movie, you're going to love it. And I sat down and watched Shine, and I think I've seen it maybe 7 or 8 times, and I really, really appreciate it. And it's really what put Jeffrey Rush on the map as an actor, as we know him today.
Right.
The movie itself, Hello, I Am David, is basically a documentary crew that's following David Helfgott, who has basically has risen to fame, finally, as a concert pianist. He's been traveling around Europe, and for those of you that don't know who David Helfgott is, he's a world-renowned pianist, but at a young age he had a nervous breakdown. And I think during his nervous breakdown, anything of any malice of any sorts left his body and left him in this pure, innocent state of how human beings, in my opinion, should be towards each other. He's just happy to be alive. Everything that he touches, he finds beautiful. Sure, and it's just amazing. He must be very exhausting to be around. I mean, you can see his wife, talking about like, okay, you got to put that down. You can't touch this. We're not doing that. We're not going over this way. You have to stop talking to these people. And so they're always constantly revolving around him, trying to make sure that he's going to be okay. But then it's very endearing. And when he sits down at the piano, the passion he has for life just extends onto the keys. And what comes out of that person is just magnificent music. I could listen to him playing the piano forever. I don't mind. And so if ever you guys get a chance to watch the movie Hello, I Am David, I can't recommend it enough. It is beautiful. It brought me to tears at a couple of places because I just think that he's a beautiful, wonderful human being, and there aren't enough people like him on the planet. And so, it was really, really interesting to watch that.
Yeah, it's the first I've ever actually heard of him. I think I've heard of the film Shine, where I didn't know it was a biopic at all. But that sounds super interesting. I definitely have to look him up. I'm not adverse to pianists in any way, so I don't see why I wouldn't.
Oh yeah, but I mean, I was just scrolling through looking for something on Netflix to watch. But when I clicked on Hello, I Am David, I was like, what is this? He looks like a monk. And then when I clicked on it, and I was like, it's David Helfgott. I was like, oh my god, this is who Shine is based on. I have to watch this. This is going to be great. And it turned out to be such a wonderful experience. So
great.
And lastly, the last movie I went to see, and I have to say a big thank you and I love you to my girlfriend. She brought me to see Charlie Chaplin's The Gold Rush with a live orchestra playing here in Quebec City. And my God, was it ever a beautiful experience. I couldn't believe how amazing it was. I actually got choked up a little bit when the first images of The Gold Rush came on, because it was my first time seeing a Charlie Chaplin movie on a big screen.
On the big screen.
And it was glorious. It was glorious. It looked amazing.
Can't believe it.
Yeah, and just when they start playing the music, just to tell you how awesome it was to be with a live orchestra, there is something in it for everyone, right? I'm there for the movie, and I'm there to watch whatever the movie is, and I'm also there to experience the music firsthand. However, these guys were playing so well that I forgot they were there at one point, and I was just watching the movie.
Yeah, sure, of course. That's the hope, isn't it, on their behalf, that you don't really take notice of them.
Yeah, but at the same time, which is interesting because my girlfriend told me I am not necessarily that much into black and white films, so I was watching the musicians more than I was watching the film.
Yeah, sure.
And so I thought that was a really interesting take on the experience, So she got her money's worth, and I got my money's worth, and it was just great.
That's amazing.
And it gave me a new appreciation for the Gold Rush, because I've always liked the Gold Rush, but it's never been one of my favorites. My favorites, will include obviously The Kid. I am a big fan of Mr. Verdoux, which most people aren't. I think it's one of Chaplin's really interesting pictures. The Great Dictator, obviously, but I've Modern Times to me is probably one of the best right there, and obviously City Lights. So those are the monuments that stick out. But the Gold Rush, seeing it on the big screen, gave me a greater appreciation for the film and how Chaplin is actually able to build tension. I found myself watching the movie and going like, oh my God, what's going to happen? But I'd seen this movie at least 5 or 6 times. And I've seen this movie many times, and I just seeing it on the big screen with the music, it kind of really brought this tension, this suspense of how he was going to shape the scenes, how he is able to treat serious subjects with a dose of humor. You're not supposed to be laughing at these people being famished. You're not supposed to be laughing about these people going through a rough financial time. And Chaplin builds his tension with whatever's going on screen with his comedy in a way that is informative and at the same time humorous. And seeing it on the big screen gave me a bigger appreciation for the messages that he was putting out there, because for a movie that dates back to 1925, that is impressive direction.
What an experience. I would love to have done something like that. I'm sure something will come up,
Yeah.
I'm sure there'll be something. I've never seen an orchestra live even, so I mean, that's something I always wanted to do. So, to combine those two is like a dream. So I'm incredibly jealous. And, it will happen. I just have to believe it will happen, and that will be that.
One of my really good friends, Pierre Olivier, went to see The Godfather with a live orchestra. And I was like, motherfucker, why didn't you tell me in advance? I would have taken the trip down to Montreal to go see that.
Fucking yeah, man. Jesus Christ.
But yeah, anyway, so if ever you guys get a chance to, if a Charlie Chaplin movie period is coming to your town and they're playing with a live orchestra, do yourselves a favor. It's a wonderful experience. I'm hoping that I'll be able to see another one of his films with that track. My special request would actually be Murnau's Sunrise, and I really love that film, and if I was to choose one that could be adapted into that thing, I would love to see Sunrise.
Perfect. Well, yep, that's what we watched this week. Very good.
So yeah, I don't know if there's a trailer for Seven Samurai. I'll try to find one. It's going to be in Japanese, so it's going to be interesting.
That would be hilarious. I'm sure people would really appreciate it. To put you in the mind of what nearly 3.5 hours of just back-to-back Japanese sounds like. Hopefully we can get a 2-minute clip of just that on its own.
Yeah, I think that'd be great. I'll find a clip, just to put them in the mood for it. So that's it. Obviously, I'm sorry, it's going to be in Japanese. No one's going to understand shit. So if you get frustrated, just fast forward a little bit, because the conversation Lee and I are about to have is actually going to be really interesting. So stay tuned, ladies and gentlemen.
ある山間の小さな村に侍の墓が4つ並んだ。野心と巧妙に疲れた狂気の時代に全く明理を顧みず哀れな百姓たちのために戦った7人の侍の話。彼らは無名のまま風のように去った。しかし彼らの優しい心と勇ましい行為は今なお美しく語り伝えられている。彼らこそ侍だ。黒澤明が描く壮烈な叙事詩。彼らはこの旗のもとに戦った。
どういうわけだこら。これは田んぼの田の字、つまり百姓たち、この村だな。この丸は俺たちだ。
最後の決戦の日は雨だった。
残るは13。これは全部フライレン。この前を通り過ぎると同時に追い打ちをかけて村の辻で挟み撃ちだ。勝負はこの一撃で決まる。
Hello and welcome back to our feature presentation of this week. I hope you enjoyed the Japanese trailer we've dug out for you. As you might not be able to tell, because you probably don't speak the language, we are going to be talking about Seven Samurai, the Akira Kurosawa film, 1954, got Toshiro Mifune in it, and Takeshi Shimura, and a bunch of other, well, obviously at least 5 more names on top of a bunch of other supporting actors.
Exactly.
Yes,
and the villagers.
Yeah, exactly. It's hailed as a modern, not a modern classic of cinema, a classic of cinema. Its basic summary is a set of bandits attacking a small forested village of farmers. They steal their produce, and the farmers band together to the nearest town to assemble an army as best they can afford, and that turns out to be the Seven Samurai, a mixed bag of different varying skilled warriors and unskilled warriors who ultimately, for various reasons, get involved in what is basically, at least to most of them, a suicide mission. Yeah, and that basically lays that out. One of the big inspirers. It's brought us, obviously, the Magnificent Seven, but also, Star Wars has a big claim to it, and piles of modern blockbusters and epics, I would say, have a lot to thank it for. But let's first go to just general experience and impressions. Jason, how was your time with Seven Samurai?
You know how my time was, Lee.
This is why I want you to admit it on recording for the people.
Okay, this was my 3rd attempt at watching Seven Samurai. The first time I watched the movie, I didn't understand what the hell people were talking about, and I ended up falling asleep and never watching it again for a long time. Then after that, I decided, because I was being put pressure on by one of my friends because he really enjoyed it. It's a guy I don't talk to anymore. And I watched it again a second time, fell asleep on it that time as well. And I basically started seeing it as this film that I probably would never get done watching, because I just couldn't see why this was considered an epic. Hold on, you fucking film nerds out there. I'm getting to the good part. Now, because this won the poll, it gave me an excuse to revisit the film.
That was my idea behind it. I mean, if anything was going to make me watch it, it would have to be the show, I would imagine, saying, hey, sit down, spend 3.5 hours of your life, chiming in on this classic that people tell you have to watch. So
yeah.
I put it in the hat for an excuse to say if we won, then there's no escaping it. We have to do it.
Exactly.
Jason had already mentioned to me that he had fallen asleep to it before because Magnificent Seven came out, and we were talking about that. So yeah.
And then I sat down to watch it a third time, but this time they say third time's the charm, I guess. Now I'll spoil this by saying I didn't stay awake. I did fall asleep on it 3 more times. I'm so sorry.
You're a nightmare. I don't fall asleep during films. How you managed to do it 3 times in the one film was incredible.
Yeah, well, I don't know. I think that it's just my nature with epics. I have trouble sitting through epics. It's just that at a 3-hour and 20-minute runtime, for me, as a person that has like high attention deficit, I cannot sit through that without becoming extremely jittery, and then it puts me flat out to sleep. It just turns me off.
Sure.
This time around, I did fall asleep 3 times. However, I really loved this picture. I really loved it, even in the sequences. I mean, the reason why I had to confess is because Lee has something that he's holding against me right now. I hadn't finished the movie until 1 hour before the recording, and my girlfriend, so beautiful as she is, sent a picture to Lee of me sleeping on the couch watching the fucking movie. And so Lee will be able to frame that and give it to me at one point. Here's Jason sitting through Kurosawa's epic masterpiece. But that being said, I love the picture. I have a lot to talk about. I want to know what you thought of the picture, and I want to know how you stay awake during movies.
The trick is not to watch them, That's as a critic, I prefer not to actually look at the screen. I just make shit up and put it on my website. And then people seem to agree, you can lie to people all the time.
Some critics do that, it's funny.
I agree, the runtime of this film is egregious at best. It's almost impossible to recommend to people to watch this film.
Oh, you can't. You have to be a film guy.
Yeah, exactly. You have to be a nut like us. I'm totally with you. I absolutely adored this film. I didn't fall asleep. I admit to pausing it a number of times to rally effort, the rally spirit. I took like a 20-minute break, and then when I played it again, it was 5 minutes, and then it was the intermission. And I didn't know there was going to be an intermission. I thought it was just going to go straight forward, so I was like, for fuck's sake.
Could have just waited that extra 5 minutes.
It was like they were kind of just building to a speech moment, and I was like, you know what, this might go on a while. I'll take some time out, refresh myself, and then I fucked it up. But at least I got to skip the intermission, so that was fine. It's generally, if we want to just brush over all we have to really say about it, it's gorgeous. As an epic, it feels it's as gritty as I can imagine a 1950s version of those events to look. I love the characters. There's so much fun in this. For its time, it just I couldn't have expected more from it. I generally expected not to really like it at all, and I came away just kind of blown away by it. So it did its job. In my head, it lives up to that classic moniker. As far as, not that I'm the most first film critic of them all, but I mean, as far as I know, this has been, I can tell that this sort of deserves its praise. Put it that way.
Oh yeah, I mean, if you look at it, from 1954, what's coming out at that time that's actually worth that significant epic style,
Sure.
Especially, I mean, I have to be honest. I mean, I'm not the biggest connoisseur of Japanese film. Kurosawa, especially, it's one of those little blemishes that I have on my film watching, resume. But now I'm looking forward to watching, I'd seen snippets of other films because I know that Kurosawa's a guy who really likes Shakespeare. So I'd seen snippets of Throne of Blood. I've seen snippets of like The Bad Sleep Well, and thinking, wow, that's interesting that a Japanese director would have an affinity for Western type stories. So I'm looking forward now to spending a little bit more time with Kurosawa, getting to know his pictures, because his direction and especially his visual language in Seven Samurai was goddamn stellar. I love this.
Great. That's the important thing. That was what I was hoping would win you over. I was like, surely because I started watching it before you did, before you sat down for your third go, and as I was watching it and I was seeing like how he takes his time setting up like little tableaus, like he takes long takes of just one shot and lets the characters breathe in that space and let you get comfortable in these surroundings and lets them speak to the characters. And I was just looking at that and going, surely to God Jason sees this, this is his fucking shit,
Well, yeah, you're right, because I'm a huge fan of Stagecoach. John Ford's 1939 Western is basically the one that started, like, put Westerns, took it from a B level and putting it to the A level status.
Right.
It's one of the films that brought John Wayne into the public, public eye. And when I was watching Seven Samurai, I was like, this guy loves John Ford. I was like, this guy loves John Ford, and I understand why a lot of like critics in Japan might have been a little bit pissed that he would have kind of inserted a little bit more of the Western feel from the United States.
Yeah.
But Kurosawa was divisive at that time, apparently, and one of his main antagonists, and apparently he's a great film director in his own right. I haven't watched any of his things, but Ozu was one of the more traditional Japanese filmmakers, and Akira Kurosawa decided that he did not want to make Ozu films. He wanted to make Kurosawa films.
Right.
And he basically tried to adapt whatever he thought was interesting, because he thought that Japanese cinema up until that time was very bland. And so with Seven Samurai, he injected a little bit of more of the American feel into Japanese cinema. And I don't know, maybe that's one of the reasons why I appreciated it so much, is because I was like, oh, this is very much like John Ford, but it has very much I can't say a Kurosawa feel because I haven't seen any more of his films.
Sure.
But I'm interested in seeing where he goes with that. As I was saying earlier, I really liked the visual language of Kurosawa's film.
Yeah.
The rising sun at the beginning of the film sets up like the circular imagery with regards to how the samurai are, this idea of wandering in and out of town.
Yeah, sure.
And the silhouette shots of the bandits moving to clear shots are really intriguing to me, because they suggest like this looming threat that is rising and will become clear with time as the movie moves forward. And also the bandits on like at the beginning, the bandits are kind of like on a cliff, I think, and they're staring down at the village.
Yeah.
Now, if we take the idea that the sun is at their backs, keeping that silhouette thing, if the villagers are looking up, it kind of recuperates the silhouette imagery of the beginning, and the shadows loom large over the village. I thought that was kind of fun. And what I also thought was interesting using that imagery is that the bandits show up in fall. So there's no life in the land, which again contrasts with the end of the film where life is everywhere, where they're actually having things growing. So I like the idea that Kurosawa is playing with the idea of like shadow imagery and circularity and things like that. So it was kind of fun. I don't know if you picked up on anything with regards to that.
Yeah, the sun is actually. I like how you said about full circle. Hot take wise, I'd have gone for like an interpretation about the. How it plays into the farmers, cycle, in a cyclic nature, like. What I love about the shadows against the sun is that, as far as how the bandits and the sun sort of play into the same image, is that for the farmers who rely on the sun also comes with this like onset danger that they rely on the sun for everything, as we all do, but farmers more than anybody, and as it comes, so do the bandits, and it gives the bandits this sort of force of nature feeling about them. You know, like they're just something to expect.
Oh yeah, that's a wonderful
something
interpretation. Keep going, man. I love that.
It's something that it much like as the sun rises and falls, as to come these natural and human disasters. Yeah. That the farmers, and what I like about the cyclic nature you said was that because at the end, you know, we get this idea that the farmers, they've won their battle, they're happy and chirpy. Realistically, I see the sun and the shadows of the bandits. I see that as something of like a foreshadowing of doom for the farmers again. The samurai seem pretty realistically assured that the farmers won this time. The samurai, they have failed, you know, in some way that they it wasn't their victory to have.
Yeah, they reiterate that twice in the movie, one at the beginning and one at the end, right? This idea that they go from war to war and they never win, but the people that they're fighting for actually do.
Exactly, yeah. So this is one for the farmers, but actually, it's not really one for the farmers. Tragically, this seems like it's going to happen again. They might have gotten these bandits, but once the samurai have gone, they walk off into the distance. The farms are defended again. They won't have learned anything. They were very straightforward and simple as people go. You know, they kept consistently judgmental of the samurai from beginning to end. They don't really thank them at the end. And this sort of nature, it kind of, I got the sense that nothing had been resolved realistically. This was just another day in the cycle. You know, this was this is what farmers have to face. And I thought with that opening image that I saw it as pretty pessimistic, realistically overall.
Yeah, maybe I think like from the samurai's point of view, but I think that with the villagers actually being part of the fighting back, there is an evolution from the villagers' perspective. I thought it was interesting because the idea that they're rebuilding at the end of the film, like, kind of goes to show that the cycle has been completed. You know, where at the beginning they had nothing. They're huddled in this little group praying to a god that's clearly not going to answer, which is probably something that was a little bit, you know... Kurosawa seems like to be pressing a few buttons there.
I love that idea that, you know, for film in like the 50s, he was kind of saying like, yeah, your god's not coming to help you.
Exactly, you know, and it's kind of weird because now towards the end of the film, the villagers, with the help of the samurai, obviously, they've come together as a community, and vanquished what I considered a plague. You know, this idea that, you know, our immune system, the strong, will survive. And so out of that, because they've actually vanquished this plague, the community itself has grown stronger. They no longer need the samurai, obviously. And that is what the dour note that you're kind of bringing up, which I appreciate. But I think that Kurosawa is saying that obviously these people's cycles will continue. I think, however, that the community of villagers, now that they know that they have the strength in order to fight, might actually be a little bit more resistant, a little bit more prepared. And the fact that they might actually be able to grow crops enough to make themselves stronger for a potential next attack. What's sad is the samurai that actually leaves the town, they just continue on to their next challenge.
Sure.
Where that is their cycle of life. You know, I don't know. I wouldn't say
my minor caveat on that is that I feel that we get a sort of portrayal of what I mean by the sort of that sort of robbed victory. You know, like this is only a minor victory in what is ultimately going to be a repeating pattern. I think we see a little bit of that in Shino, the girl character who falls for Katsushiro.
Yeah.
The idea that, you know, there's this passing moment between the two of them at the very end, but then it seems as she's the only real person who actually interacts with the samurai after the battle. You know, she's the only one who gives them really any sort of notice as they leave. You know, the fact that she doesn't so much acknowledge them, but also just goes right back to work and just fits back into the same pattern. That makes me feel like they haven't evolved. You know, that they've gotten back to what they wanted, which was just comfortable existence. But while the film suggests, you know, they took an active part claiming back their land in this fight, I saw through Shino the idea that, you know, nothing's changed. You know, it's even though the big statements she had made, the big fight that she had made for the love at the time, it was all just emotions on the day. But past that point, it's back to business, it's back to farming, and ultimately it's back to to something that's going to come their way and fuck things up. I kind of saw it that way. It's a bit more pessimistic. I get that it's probably not, the intended vision for it. It should be a genuine victory for the farmers. But I felt that this was only a step that would ultimately, be taken away from them at a later point. And I got that from the bandits in the sun imagery.
That's it's kind of cool because I got something completely different. The way that I saw the pictures, the way that Kurosawa was framing things up and how he uses his camera, I thought it was kind of interesting because the first time we see the villagers, how can I put it? Kurosawa, he paints a wonderful picture of like this communal loneliness and despair.
Sure.
And so the imagery at the beginning suggests this idea of confinement even in freedom.
Yeah.
And it's kind of odd because when we see the villagers for the first time, they're huddled in this group. There's nowhere near close to nature at all.
Yeah,
right? They're just huddled. Everything is like there's a desert. They're basically sitting in sand. There's nothing there, right? But by the time we get to the intermission, and then when the intermission stops after like Kembe gives his wonderful speech where he says, this is the nature of war by protesting, by protecting others. You save yourselves. If you only think of yourself, you'll only destroy yourself.
Yeah.
And then that was wonderful because Kembe throughout the entire movie seems to be a guy that's very reserved, very wise, and he likes humor. He's a guy that seems to be easily approachable. But in that moment, you're like, holy fuck, I had no idea.
He takes the reins.
Exactly. It's just, you're like, what the fuck? That was wonderful. It was a powerful scene. I loved it.
Yeah, it's amazing.
After the intermission, you're there with Kikuchiyo, Mifune's character, and the first shots that Kurosawa puts are these very tight shots of people working in fields where the imagery is then you see these close-up shots of them and grass. He pulls out a little bit and then you see Kikuchiyo kind of putting people in line, showing them how to work and things like that. So by the end of the movie, by seeing them work in nature, having this idea of water and the soil, I thought that there was growth on the community's part. It's not just an other day. It's really an evolution in terms of how it is. Because if you look at how Kurosawa uses the images at the beginning, middle, and end of the movie, there is a clear evolution in my opinion.
That's a good way of putting it. Yeah, the fact that the way they raised them montage-like to prepare for the battle and that ultimately they keep that form by the end.
Yeah, exactly.
That is a good image, and I think that probably supports your take on it a little more than mine. It's one of those things, and I'm sure it's going to be for almost everything we approach here. Is that the more I watch it, the more I'm gonna see it because I definitely want to revisit this film a number of times over the next couple of years.
Yeah, me too. I got that feeling as well. While I was watching it.
I was like, you can only take in so much information. Yeah, well, obviously, but clearly your mind has a valve of which where it takes too much information and shuts down.
I love that. That's exactly what it is. It's and then
I've learned enough now.
Exactly. It just shuts down to process the information.
Yeah, but
wonderful.
I feel like first reading, this was a lot of the stuff that I could kind of get away with. It's going to be base value, but at the same time, I look forward to rereading this again and again. Each time I have this feeling that I'm going to walk away completely different opinions of the film. Like, oh, it's depressing. Oh, it's so hopeful. It's quite realistic, so on and so forth. It's going to be a back and forth between all these different takes.
Yeah.
I can already see it. It lends itself to being that it's a film snob's film. It's got it's so many images compacted onto each other.
Oh yeah, but you said it so much better when we were talking alone.
Sure.
You had sent me a message and said like this is a film director's wet dream. And I was like, all right, it is, and I kind of lent myself to that imagery. I was like taking it all in, and probably that's what happened as I shut down. It's just too much to process at the same time. But when you're watching it, I want you to keep a close watch, how Kurosawa goes from close-ups to wide or establishing shots.
Yeah.
Which kind of put the audience in a position where their eyes can't wander. It's very, very subjective film directing. It's not objective at all.
I get that.
And so in doing that, he kind of sets up this idea of like confinement imagery. I know I talked about this in Captain America Civil War. I don't know if the Russos are fans of Seven Samurai, but there is this confinement imagery that there is throughout the film.
Yeah.
You know, and he uses he uses all these shots where people are kind of peering from behind wooden fences or like openings that aren't necessarily windows but act as like somewhat like windows, you know, and all those shots create this kind of caged in feel.
Yeah.
And to me, that's the most prevalent motif throughout the film. You know, it's predominantly related to from what I gathered anyway, from what I was reading and from what I was seeing on screen, the social status of the villagers versus the samurai. You know, this idea that there's always going to be a distance between them, even though they come together and work. There is like a fence at one point where they can't cross. So you have this idea that they're always hiding behind something. You know, but like in their own houses, these people are caged in. They don't really know, and there's supposed to be this image of freedom. But no, I saw this prison-like imagery almost everywhere throughout the movie.
Yeah,
you know, and just based on the idea, like what I was talking about, the idea that it might be a morality tale. I did pick up on certain motifs that are kind of typical to fairy tales, and the one that was like that really jumped out at me was the idea of going into the woods. And I'm going to use a quote because when I was in university studying like fairy tales and children's literature, the woods kept being this one motif that used to come back, and Shakespeare uses it a lot. And because Kurosawa loves Shakespeare, you know, especially like if you look at Midsummer Night's Dream, the idea that they're wandering into the forest and they kind of, you know, get morphed into different people. People fall in love with different people. It becomes a little bit of a skewed reality for them, and then they have to wander back into the forest for Oberyn to kind of set everything straight again. And so I'm going to quote scholar Joyce Thomas, who explains that the woods or the forest in fairy tales is the threshold of the supernatural. The edges constitute a literal threshold between man and nature, the cultivated and the uncultivated, the tame and wild, the known and the unknown. And I thought it was kind of cool that Kurosawa uses it in Seven Samurai, where Katsushiro and Shino go into the woods, and then Shino kind of loses her mind when she's lying down in the flowers.
Yeah, like a dream sequence.
And and I mean, you know, if you look at fairy tales, you know, like it's always this place where the evil lurks.
Yeah.
The places like if you go like Hansel and Gretel, the witch lives in the forest, or even in Sleeping Beauty, you know, you have the idea that the magical elements of the three fairies that are going to help Aurora kind of be supportive. They're out in the forest as well. I mean, Beauty and the Beast, he lives in a castle in the forest, you know, so this idea of enchantment, and that's exactly where we find the bandits. The bandits live in the forest, you know, and Rikichi's wife looks insane when she's coming out of the barracks.
Oh, yeah.
When they set fire to the barracks, you know, so the idea that the woods shape these beings, these people, the bandits, for the ways that they are, there's this supernatural quality to them. They come in and out of the story as ghosts that haunt over these people and things like that. And I find it interesting that Kurosawa would have kind of recuperated that fairy tale imagery and kind of peppered it in throughout.
I love that he also doesn't give us too much time in the forest. In fact, in one specific sequence, he lets the samurai Kyozo, he just lets him disappear into the forest and let the forest be the threat in itself. You know, the mystery of what happens to him, how he gets the gun is left completely vague, and then he just shows up again.
Exactly.
And he never mentions it, and you're just like, what the fuck happened out there? You know, we don't really even see them traverse to the bandits' hideout. You know, we just sort of show up there and see it through the forest. We don't see their trek as such. And even Kikichiro, when he ambushes one of the gunsmen, he crops up behind him in this sort of, like, you know, it's very typical of a stage play. You know, he enters a scene as such, and, you know, he has this great show of bravery that no one sees but him. We see it, the audience, but then no one, you know, to everybody it was reckless, dangerous, and he gets people killed for it. It's kind of like being enticed by the forest, you know. He got lured out by what was, you know, what he saw was a chance to be honorable. It's just intrigue luring him from the forest. I think that all kind of plays really heavily into that theme. I really like it.
Yeah, exactly. And I mean, it is one of those magical places where you never know what's going to happen. You know, the idea that I think it's one of the first bullets actually comes out of the forest. It's something that these villagers don't necessarily know about, but the samurai kind of know about.
The guns to me in this film always seem like magic, you know. They just For it's like spell casting, they just take lives. We never spend a lot of time actually looking at the guns. It's very interesting.
It's wonderful. I thought, the idea of using muskets for death, this idea that, to me, they mirror kind of a little bit of how Kyuzo is explosive in the way he kind of settles scores with individuals.
Sure.
There are two deaths that are shown in slow motion in the film. And I think that Kurosawa does that well enough, because if we kind of use the imagery of death that was in Hollywood at the time, if we go from the 30s and 40s, like gangster pictures and things like that, the deaths aren't slow. They're just kind of overacted.
Yeah.
It's just like someone grabbing his heart or his chest. And,
yeah.
Exactly. And so you don't necessarily feel the death because it's a theatrical death. And I think that the two deaths, showing them in slow motion, Kurosawa is basically telling the audience to take notice that death is something that one must notice. Actually.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And so it's really interesting that even by preparing you with those two deaths, when the shots come from the forest and you hear that pow, you know that the threat is real.
Yeah.
The audience is set up to kind of care about the deaths when they occur on film.
Definitely.
In the film, sorry, at those particular moments. So it was really cool. I love that. I wanted to get to something that's a little bit negative for me.
I did want to ask you if there were some negatives of the film, but sure, go for it.
I'm going to start with a negative because, like I said, to me this was a positive overall experience, and I want to get to my two favorite parts in the film after this. But my negative for it, we were talking just a little bit earlier, and I know that you enjoy it, and I'm looking forward to your take because you're going to prove me wrong.
Well, I wouldn't say that.
I think that the forbidden love story was a little too much. The idea that Katsushiro and Shino, to me, the movie stopped moving forward at that point, and I didn't particularly feel that it was necessary. I understand that, there has to be a love interest, maybe possibly to get a different audience in, but it felt shoehorned in.
I do feel you're right there to an extent. It does feel like this is ticking a box of what is expected of films, not just of that time, but of big epics in general. We need something to cling to as a sort of, how much can you relate to a farmer and a set of warriors, basically, You need something that harkens to your modern life, and it doesn't matter which culture you're from, romance is a universal kind of reaction, and even if it was a sort of tribute to the westernized takes on on the westerns, there's always sort of the damsel to save, or there's always like, I would say maybe that's the cynical way of looking at it, but I think it's definitely there. I think it does tick that box that this is. I would understand the argument to feel that just doesn't jar with the same narrative in a lot of ways, because it's obvious. It feels slower. It feels oddly focused next to all the other samurai who just don't get that much time to just sit down and take time out, I guess. Feels a bit jarring. Exactly. I totally get that. I mean, at the same time, in the number of interpretations, I like where it goes. I like where it plays out. I like what it says about, as we were already speaking earlier, about harkens that message of, get over your old ways. This is war, and these are people changing a little tense at the moment. Maybe let them just be themselves for a bit. I like that we have the time to explore that, and again, I like how it plays into the resolve more than anything. I like how Shino ultimately rejects Katsushiro. I feel there's something so heartbreaking about that they never accepted the samurai, these people who worked for free to protect them, that ultimately they kind of revert back to their ways. Like, they always had these prejudices against them entering in the first place, that they never felt comfortable with the idea, that the few that did feel comfortable with the idea always knew they were getting the worst of the worst. And then, even when they're in the town and they don't, rape the women like they were predicted to do, and they don't fucking steal all their money like they were predicted to do, they don't get really any significant thanks or even, any real gratitude for what, and it's not that they needed it, but it feels that the farmers could have expressed it, and Shino, I think, characterizes more than anyone that significant pull away, that the farmers, they're back to work, they're back to what they have to do. The cycle continues, nature goes on, they do their job, the samurai must then depart and do their job, which is to fight these somewhat, in their case, pointless battles, you know, that they don't get any significant joy out of, they don't find any real purpose from, but it is their duty. The farmers don't see them as people, they see them as samurai, and Shino embodies that motion, that she just, ultimately, the war was the war, the passion that she had with Kikuchiyo, which we get a good amount of time spending and building up and learning why these two love each other in some form, even if it's rash, that when reality returns, that falls apart for her. He is still, he looks for her, he kind of like you see that he almost follows her, but ultimately realizes their paths have to go different ways. It's her immediate rejection of him, the sort of not really looking twice, going back to work, that she has to rebuild upon her role in society after this blemish in her father's eyes. I feel that because we spent that amount of time getting to know this romance, getting to see how intense it was, to see it drop so completely and go from 100 to 0 like nothing, I think that's devastating, and I think it speaks a lot about the samurai as a role in this story. It really helps push what Kanbei says about, you know, that ultimately it's not their victory. I felt that was an okay line for it was sad they lost the samurai that they had, that the good fighting and the good people that went into keeping these farmers safe, but I didn't really feel it until I saw Shino push past them, you know, and so I felt like that was a complete necessity for me. I felt like that tied me into how utterly heartbreaking this entire scenario was. Even if it was a positive moment, it's just this underlying current that it was kind of all in vain.
Yeah, I get it. I understand. I mean, and if you put it that way, it makes absolute sense. There's no other way to read it, in my opinion, you know, because I think logically that's what Kurosawa is trying to put forth. But I think it tries to, you know, address the idea, like Katsushiro, let's not kid ourselves, it is a coming-of-age story from his point of view. And he goes from being just a village guy to a samurai, you know, and I just think, however, that it goes to show, possibly, I don't want to recuperate a cliche, but I mean, the more things change, the more they stay the same again. I've said this on 3 podcasts.
But this one's good.
Annoying me.
Because this is the one that I agree with you on that one, I would say.
Yeah, and I just think that, you know, the idea that I think Kurosawa is just pointing it out with the film at this point by saying it shouldn't be this way.
Yeah, absolutely.
I think that, you know, you guys are creating your own divisions.
Yeah.
This should not have to exist.
I think as a sort of criticism of how not just relationships work, but even like the culture, I assume, though I'm obviously not incredibly versed on it, but it's probably a good criticism of Japanese culture at that point, and even maybe as a comparison to how Japanese traditional culture exists today. I can almost definitely read that exists on some form, and to audiences that would have seen this at the time, that juxtaposition, that the heart nature, the way she disposes of him would have been a wake-up call, you know, that would have really, they would have just went like, well, that's just, why did that happen? Why did that happen to him? Why did that happen to her, you know? Why were they pulled away so easily? Yeah.
That's what I mean. I mean, their relationship acts as a metaphor for the hereditary classes of society. I mean, Katsushiro and the village girl are confined to their social classes, and I think that Kurosawa is trying to denounce that. I think that even if we are looking at this movie from a 1954 perspective, I think that the themes that Kurosawa is trying to put forth aren't typical 16th century themes. I think that they're things that people are still living by at that moment in time, and I think that's exactly what you're saying. Right.
But my point was that's what I got out of it. At the same time, I could see that if you already knew where it was going, and if you you didn't buy into them, and you felt that it was distracting to the story that was already, you know, pretty focused and already very long, I could completely understand that when you spend 5-10 minutes in a fucking forest scene where she goes a little crazy, you're kind of like, what the fuck are we doing here? Don't we have a fucking barricade to be building? You know, don't we have bandits to be working against?
But anyway, that was the only thing that lingered in my mind as something that I thought was a negative. And I'll say it, and I don't care who I piss off. I thought that Toshiro Mifune's performance might have been just a little bit over the top. I'm looking forward to seeing him in other movies because he's a legendary Japanese actor.
Yeah.
He's world-renowned. I'm not even going to say Japanese. He's a legendary actor. And I'm looking forward to seeing him in other films because this one did not do it for me.
Yeah. I thought it was an uphill battle when he first shows up. The character of Kikuchio, I just didn't like him. I just thought he was obnoxious, and I didn't really care if we were going to get an arc where we were going to be sympathetic to him at some point. I just wanted him to shut the fuck up. But the way he jumps and clambers around and mopes all the time.
Yeah.
I thought it was very over the top, but at the same time, there was great comic timing in the performance, and we get a lot more time to witness that as the film goes on. I think the first 20 minutes of his performance, there wasn't a lot to work with. We were establishing that he's the crazy one and so on, and I thought he was going to be a bit part, not one of the samurais, so I kind of just wrote him off in my head. But as he plays a bigger role and all, we kind of get more time to linger with him and his interactions with the others, and I find him very enjoyable.
Yeah, well, I mean, like I said, near the end of the film, I think he's doing a much better job, but I understand what you mean. I mean, it is his arc. He goes from being a buffoon to this very likable guy and all that. I was just saying that, like, it was very hard for me to get into it.
Yeah.
Because I really, really took to Takeshi Shimura, the guy who plays Kembe. I was like, my God, this guy's suave.
Yeah,
is,
man.
Palpable. I loved it.
Yeah, every scene he was
great.
in, I couldn't take my eyes off him. He was just so...
Exactly.
He was exactly what I wanted a main character to be, you know? Just a calm, friendly, warm character portrayed very knowingly. The sense he brought exactly the right amount of depth and introspective nature to that character. I just loved him. I thought he was fantastic. Cool. And there's always Kuzio, the stone cold badass.
Well, I want to talk about that. That's it. He's in my two favorite scenes in the movie.
Yeah.
He's in both scenes. And the first one is where Kembe goes to recruit him.
Yeah.
You know, he's getting involved in this little fight, this little duel with a guy who's clearly not a samurai.
Yeah.
And so the man tries his luck at beating Kyuzo, and he dies as a result.
Yeah.
You know, it's just this guy's a dumbass who's like, I can beat the shit out of you. Kyuzo says, no, I won. You know, and it just goes to show how committed a swordsman Kyuzo is, how in control he is as an individual, and his efficiency is impressive. Perfect stance. Calm and perfect execution in explosiveness.
Yeah.
I loved it. He's just standing there. He goes through the motions twice, exactly the same, and boom, the result is the same every time. And it's fun because you get kind of this practice run where you're like, did he really win?
Yeah.
Because you question it as an audience. You're like, okay, I want to see if the other idiot is actually right.
Yeah.
And then when you see he does the exact same fucking move, you're like, okay, I understand how he won. I understand how he sees he won. It cost someone's life, but not how I see it. But that was fucking wonderful. I don't know. What was one of your favorite scenes? I'll get to my second one after.
Yeah, well, with him specifically, and it is one of my favorite scenes. It is that scene where he walks into the forest and comes back. I loved everything about it. It's just...
Yeah.
He just doesn't play it like you would if you were the guy who just raided a camp of bandits to get their fucking gun. He just disappears, he comes back, he tosses them the gun, and he just sits down and goes to sleep. He's like, I'm fucking tired, basically, you know, that's all he was saying.
Yeah.
I did my job tonight. That was that, you know, and I went like, what?
My shift is over.
Yeah, just what a stone cold badass.
Okay, well, my second favorite part in the film is when the three guys, when Kyuzu, Kikuchio, and Katsushiro, they're going to see the scouts in the forest. They're going to see those three guys that came to see...
Oh, yes.
How the village was.
Yeah.
And, I mean, Kembe tells Katsushiro, you don't do anything. You watch. Your job is to observe.
Yeah.
This is a learning curve. And I loved how Kurosawa built the tension around that scene.
Yeah.
Because Kikuchio climbs the fucking tree, and then Kyuzo is just sitting at the bottom of the tree twirling a flower.
That's right.
And then Katsushiro is sitting just a little bit. It's kind of in the same flower patch that he was with Shido.
Yeah.
But now it's used for a completely different thing, right? So Kurosawa builds the tension excessively well, because I thought that Katsushiro was going to jump out and tell the other two that the bandits were coming.
Yeah.
But you can see it. I mean, just the way that the shot lingers on the close-up shot of his face, you're like, shut the fuck up. Shut the fuck up. Don't you move. You're supposed to observe, you know? And it's kind of interesting because the way that Kuro sets up my reaction to how Katsushiro is going to act is because in the previous scene, Katsushiro runs in to tell Kembe that the scouts are around the village.
Yeah.
And then immediately after, Kyuzo says, okay, the bandits are here. And then Kembe says, how would you know that? And he says, why else would Katsushiro run into the house? And you're like, okay, so we have this guy who knows how to wait for a situation, which is Kyuzo. And we have the other one who jumps the gun, you know?
Yeah.
And then with the other scene, just after that, when everyone's hiding inside the houses, Kikuchiyo's walking around and someone says, get the fuck inside. The bandits are coming. And he's like, what? The bandits? And
he's already scared them off.
Exactly. And with the way that Kurosawa sets up this scene with the tree is interesting, because now we go into that scene with preconceived notions of how these characters are going to act. So Katsushiro is laying down in his patch of flowers, and you're like, don't jump out. And then we see Kikuchiyo that's in the tree, and we're like, calm the fuck down. And then Kyuzo's just playing with the flower, and you're like, what are you doing? And so you don't really understand what's going to
what the plan is.
And it's so cool because the young one waits. We realize that Mifune's character, you know, Kikuchiyo, isn't as efficient as Kyuzo. Kyuzo takes out two guys, and then after that, you see Kikuchiyo just choking the shit out of another guy.
Pummeling him to death.
It's so weird because, you know, Kyuzo's like, slash one sword, he runs up to the other one, slash another sword. And it's just weird because he knew exactly how, you could tell a difference of what a samurai is supposed to be, just in that sequence alone. I loved that sequence. And I loved how Kurosawa sets you up to kind of believe, oh, Christ, I don't want him to jump out and do something stupid. And it was really fun because it was really, when you're in the hands of a capable director, he'll put you through things like that, build the tension inside you, and he's completely in control at this point. He had me. And I was like, fuck. And I was like, oh, beautifully played. One last point I wanted to make is the use of music that I really enjoyed, because he does pepper out, like, you know, even during Kembe's wonderful speech about working together to defend, you know, he makes the music rise because there is some sort of a beautiful message to be understood, you know, so the swelling of the music. And I love how at the end of the film he completely contrasts that with silence. There is no music during the battle, and I thought that instead of having the music swell as it did during the speech, because that's supposed to be empowering, the fact that he decides to not use music and let the terror swell in the final scenes and let the brutality speak for itself was kind of fun, because it adds a level of realism to the entire battle, where you're like, wow, that's a very responsible thing to do as a director. And it's a very tricky thing, in my opinion, to just feel the need to feel confident enough in your own material to say the images will speak for themselves. I don't need to manipulate the audience any further. What they're witnessing is going to be enough. I was wonderfully amazed that he chose.
That's often the hallmark of a great director, though, isn't it? The confidence in what you're showing people is exactly how they're going to take it. So I agree 100% on that.
Cool. And that's it. You were talking about the numbers and stuff like that. We're talking about 7. You know, 7. If you look at it, there are biblical implications. I don't think that Kurosawa was necessarily trying to bring into that. 7 is obviously one of those. We were talking about patterns earlier. 7 is there. And the fact that they're not 4 at the end, that they're 3, this idea that they form a trinity, is also interesting. It's prevalent in fairy tales as well. So I kind of got the motif. 7 is also prevalent in fairy tales.
I believe in Japanese culture as well. 4 is like a number signifying death and bad luck. So that there are 4 deaths of the samurais is also pretty fun.
Exactly, And that's it. You know, I thought that it was really interesting, that shot that he has at the end of the film, at the end of Seven Samurai, this idea of 4 graves and 3 survivors, I was like, wow, isn't that beautiful?
Yeah,
it
it's
was
gorgeous.
Just a wonderful imagery.
It's very poignant.
But,
It's lovely.
yeah, but the fact that the samurais are on top of the hill and like the dead ones are on the hill, and then you'll have the 3 remaining samurai, which is Shiro Tsurugi, Kembe, and Katsushiro, that they're dwarfed by the size of the mountain, that the people that have died actually are much higher.
Yeah.
You know, the idea that you have them and then you'll have the sky kind of in heaven in a sense, and then you'll have these people that are doomed to be staying amongst the walking.
Exactly.
So it's kind of like an honorable image.
Yeah,
that there's honor in death.
Yeah, well, exactly. I think Japanese culture is keen on that idea, honor and death, and it's also kind of like a sad note about the remaining samurai. It's almost like they fail to fulfill their purpose. Yeah, you know, like
that's the other thing. It's tragic.
Yeah, exactly.
Right?
That, you know, the only end for a samurai is death, and you know it's inevitable that they all stand together in this one frame. 4 dead, 3 alive. The numbers outweigh them. It's inevitable for all things, but for these 3 specifically, there's no other way. You know, the farmers, they sow seeds of life. You know, they get back to planting. They get back to ensuring that village survives. But the samurai, their imagery stationed with death. And eventually, just a winding road, you know, they just leave. Uncertainty.
Right. Absolutely. And I mean, now that I've seen the full film, I kind of understand why it stands the test of time, in my opinion, and it'll continue to. And one last point before we close this off, I just wanted to say, we were talking earlier this week, and I mentioned, I was like, hey, so how did you find Bug's Life?
Yeah, that's right.
the true version of Bug's Life. This was
a throwaway comment that led to its own fucking rabbit hole. That's the word I was looking for.
Kurosawa might have actually based Seven Samurai on Aesop's fable, The Ant and the Grasshopper. And it would be stupid of me anyway to assume that he didn't know about the fable and that he didn't use that with things that were going on in Japanese in Japan in the 16th century, what he was going through in the 50s, and the fact that he was very well read in terms of Shakespeare and just in film in general, like the fusion that he had with the United States and European cinema. I mean, it would be dumb for me to assume that he did not know about this fable and he didn't actually use it.
Never heard of it. Yeah.
I think that there is that.
Yeah, no, they never mentions it specifically, but there's kind of this overarching theme that is very similar in the way the story is told. Definitely.
And so I mean, it's very short, so I might actually tack it on to our description. You know, if the people want to read the Ant and the Grasshopper, you know, it's very easy to find online. But yeah, I thought it was great that a lot of people have been using Seven Samurai to do that. You know, Magnificent Seven, even the remake. But then we wouldn't have had the Dirty Dozen. We wouldn't have had like Sam Peckinpah's The Wild Bunch. You know, these are all movies that kind of came out of inspiration for what Kurosawa had done.
Yeah, absolutely. I'd say even, Avengers, there'd be no Avengers. You know, if you want to go for an even more modern example.
Jesus Christ, yeah, you're absolutely right, man. These people that band together for a greater good. So, do we even bother grading this?
No, how embarrassing it must be for a film.
Yeah, exactly. No, I'm not even going to bother grading this. I can't recommend it to normal people.
Yeah.
But to anybody who's interested in the history of cinema in general.
There must be a decent amount of them since they did vote for this film.
Yeah, exactly. You know? So I'm hoping
over 50% of our audience said this is what they wanted to hear about. So, I mean, there you go.
Great. I really love this film. I can't wait to watch it again. I think I'm actually going to put this on my yearly watch list. It actually gave me a reason to maybe go out and get the Criterion version so I could watch the documentaries that come with it and all that stuff to get all the background information, because I'm clearly not well read in terms of Japanese culture or anything like that, and maybe people that are going to be listening to this podcast are going to be like, these fucking douchebags don't know shit.
Well, I never debated that.
But that's it. Neither did I. I mean, I did my homework. I brought whatever I knew to the table, and if it helps some people out there kind of want to watch the movie, then it's great for them and do their own research.
Yeah.
But anyway, for now, it's going to be great. Anything else you want to add, sir?
Yeah, no, I'm on the same boat. I feel I'll be coming back to this a lot of times. I'm very interested to pursue a little more into Japanese cinema. That's the main focus I got from this. But at the same time, I feel that I'm always going to have this endearing affection for Seven Samurai now. I feel that it's one of those films, it'll get shorter each time I see it.
Oh, yeah.
You know, once you know all the patterns and how it plays out, and you're just looking for the minor details in each scene, not even maybe watch it the whole way through, maybe just take it a half at a time, maybe take 10, 20 minutes out, just bits and pieces, see how they unfold, see how it handles, storytelling, and sort of just revel a little more in how well handled this was. I absolutely loved the film. I knew I had to be forced into it to want to watch it, but take my being forced into it and then enjoying watching it as a good sign that it could happen to you.
All right, cool. And so I guess that's about it.
That's good.
All right, so my name is Jason Michael. I want to thank you guys all for tuning in once again to the Atlantic Screen Connection podcast. This was episode 8 on Seven Samurai, directed by Akira Kurosawa. We hope we did it justice and brought a little bit more to the table for you guys to chew on. And you can find me at film_faculty on Twitter, and I'll put the mic over to Lee.
Yeah, and you can find me. I'm always writing away at bigpicturereviews.co.uk. Besides that, you can find me on Twitter. I'm always talking to people there. We're always having a good time. So I'm at Big Pic Reviews.
That's it. Don't forget to leave us a little review on iTunes. It's going to help us a lot. We want to know what you guys are thinking. We're going to be putting a little bit more polls out for you guys to vote on, because I really enjoyed the experience of actually getting...
This is great.
Yeah, just trying to figure out what it is we want to review and things like that. Getting your opinions on it is fun interaction.
Yeah, definitely.
Cool.
Yeah.
So that's us signing out. Thank you very much. And enjoy Seven Samurai if you guys are going to brave it out. Take care. Bye-bye.
Cool. Bye.
This conversation can serve no purpose anymore. Goodbye.